But first, let's talk NBA Finals. So the NBA Finals are currently 1-1. And I don't know about you, so let's start with this. The Miami Heat beat the Denver Nuggets in Denver last night, 111-108. The Denver Nuggets win game one, 104-93. It's a fascinating way that game two bore itself out. And to be honest, I didn't watch it until this morning because, again, yesterday was a mad dash to try and be able to file the draft guide and get that thing done and get it off of my plate as much as anything. But I think I was just really fascinated by the texture of the game and the way that it started with that incredible Miami Heat run with like all of the Max Strus threes and some of the really interesting sets. We're not going to break down tape today necessarily, but I thought that Miami in the first quarter particularly did a really good job of kind of playing against Denver's over aggression in ball screen scenarios. Particularly, there's one play that stands out in my mind where they ran like an empty side ball screen between, I think it was like Gabe Vincent and Max Strus. And Strus essentially set a ghost screen and just shot to the corner immediately. And it was really, really smart and intelligent because Denver is playing oftentimes like blitzing and playing at the level in some of those small screen actions. And just little things like that, I think, created real open opportunities for the Miami Heat, particularly from beyond the 3-point line. I know there was a lot of consternation about the fact that Miami shot 17 for 35 from three. They shot 48% from three. They're not going to do that again. I'll be honest with you. I thought that like Denver's defense was merely okay in terms of preventing open 3-pointers in that game. I didn't think that they did as well as they did in game one in that regard. And I felt like there were more, this is anecdotal, I don't know necessarily based if the numbers will bear that out, but it felt like to me there were more open in rhythm threes for Miami in this game. And I think that Denver is going to have to figure that out as much as anything moving forward here.
Yeah, I think against Miami, everyone wants to talk about, it's one game and they've been shooting over 40% from three this whole playoffs. They have guys that are really stepping up and just drilling shot after shot after shot. So you kind of have to run them off the line a little bit more and be really aggressive, not just when you're playing at the point of attack against ball screens or things like that, but in chasing shooters off the line and making them take those one dribble side steps, one dribble pull-ups, or repenetrate it, that you can rotate around and scramble off of them. You just can't give up wide open catch and shoot threes.
Totally agree. And I think that there are a few interesting things that are happening here. And I think that a big piece of it that I kind of want to talk about is Bam Adebayo. And the reason that I think Bam is a bit more of a difficult assignment for Nikola Jokic offensively than Anthony Davis was, for instance. And frankly, I think Anthony Davis is probably a better offensive player in terms of like being able to produce points than Bam Adebayo is. But I think the challenges that Bam presents in terms of the ability to actually handle the ball and pass and play make is really, really intriguing. And I think that part of this is based off of what Miami is doing kind of on the backside. One way that Denver tends to mitigate Nikola Jokic's, foot speed concerns oftentimes whenever he is pulled away from the basket, either by centers or in ball screen scenarios when they play more at the level, is that in order to make it so he can't get the corner turned on him, they try and typically have a man dig in or stunt in from the weak side or from the strong side as a ball handler if the guy is going strong side as a drive, to try and arrest that guy's momentum so that it gives Jokic just a little bit more space to cover, right? They typically have that like wing guy hug into the paint and then they try and rotate around it, right? In this case, what Miami did, I think, was really interesting. They basically started on every single time that, Jokic was pulled away from the basket at the top of the key. They did an exchange on either the strong side or the weak side, depending on where the drive was coming, so that as that drive is coming, you're exchanging with the wing defender going down to the corner, and he's going backward now instead of being able to stunt into the paint. If he stunts while he's going backward, you're probably going to end up with a wide open corner three, or in that case, you're going to end up with a throw to the corner and then a reversal up to the wing, where you're then forcing Jokic to close out on a shooter, and that's not really what you want.
And one thing there, Sam, that I noticed was in game one, when Miami was a little bit smaller, Denver would switch off ball, that they would stay in those gaps and pass off those exchanges or assignments. Miami goes a little bit bigger with Kevin Love and Adebayo next to each other in game two. A little more concern from Denver about that off-ball switching, which allows the exchanges to really have an impact.
Yeah, it's 100% right. And I'm really, really intrigued by what Denver does now to adjust off of those exchanges between the wing and the corner man, because that, I think, is a really, really critical thing for them to figure out in terms of being able to stop the dribble penetration that eventually gets them into any sort of rotation, right? And eventually, in Miami's case, when you're surrounding Bam Adebayo with 4 shooters, which they basically do at all times, it does really create an interesting dynamic. Now, there's obviously like a lot of question here moving forward about like Tyler Hero and Tyler Hero's role. I don't know. I mean, like, do we think Tyler Hero returns? Because I actually think like having Tyler Hero as another shooter could be valuable, although it seems like, based on reporting, like he did have some soreness still in that hand, which makes you think like if he can't shoot, maybe he might not be valuable. Like he needs to be able to shoot 40%. If he can shoot 40%, he's probably valuable. If not, then it's a real question. And by the way, hand injuries tend to mess with your ball handling more than your shooting a lot as well. So if he can handle the ball, he might be valuable, but if he can't, I don't know.
Well, and beyond that, I think they mess with you a little bit from a like taking contact and having to brace yourself on your fall kind of perspective. So if you are coming off of a hand injury, you might tend to be more of a jump shooter, more of a catch and shoot guy. And, if you're Miami and you're looking at the guys who've been impactful for them on this playoff run, the guys who have been are all really good catch and shoot guys. Like, whose minutes are you going to bump and take away in order to get Tyler Hero back in there? That's not meant to be disrespect to Hero. Great season, really, really good player. But this team is really clicking right now to the point where I don't know whose minutes you would take away from and give them to Hero.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually really right. I don't know that I would want to take any of these dudes out of the lineup. They are fighting and scratching and clawing on defense. And I think they did a really good job defensively in that game as well. If you can hold Denver in a second half to 51 points like they did, I think you deserve a lot of credit at the end of the day. And what they're doing is they're essentially staying home on all of the shooters and just forcing Nikola Jokic to beat them. And like, Nikola Jokic is incredible. Like, they didn't slow down Jokic at all. He had 41 points in this game and shot 16 of 28. And like, there was a stretch there in the second quarter where they had Cody Zeller on him, or like late in the first quarter as well. And it was just like, this is laughable what Nikola Jokic is doing right now. But I think that I like that strategic outcome a little bit better, because you're taking away some of the sprayed 3-point options that are typically available to Jokic.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a math equation here. You bank on your team making more threes than the twos that Jokic is going to make.
Yep. I think that's right. I mean, what have you seen from Denver's offense thus far that has impressed you, or maybe made you feel like it's a little bit bogged down right now to an extent? Because it feels like to me Denver wants the roles to be flipped. They want Jamal Murray to be the scoring option, and they want Nikola Jokic to be the facilitator and basketball supercomputer that we've all come to know and love. It feels like to me Miami is trying to flip that and make it so Jamal has to make the decisions, and Jokic is the one that is scoring and playing. And Jokic is so good that he can do that. But I wonder if we're getting the same value out of Jamal Murray on Denver's side is what we typically do.
So game one is always a feeling out process. And what Miami really took away from that is, hey, we can't really go small against these guys because Aaron Gordon, whoever is that, like, they're just going to find ways to punish us for being so small. So we see Kevin Love reinserted into the starting lineup in game two, and a lot more aggression on Jamal Murray, trying to get the ball out of his hands. Again, make him more of a passer in that regard and see if Jokic either picks up the slack as a scorer or just find a way for somebody else to beat you. And I thought that was
Yep.
a really interesting formula for them. I would love to see more dribble handoffs for Murray to try to get him the ball on the move, more empty side two-man games between the two of them where Jokic is coming to initiate that handoff or set a ball screen for Murray so that it's open for backdoors or slips for Jokic that turn into post-ups. There are a lot of adjustments that Malone can make in that regard. And again, I think Denver, they surround those guys with floor spacing. They have some good slashers and smart players who know how and when to cut off of that empty side two-man game. I think they'll be fine, whatever it is that they choose to do. Just curious to see what Malone decides is the next button to hit.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the question. Have you seen enough from Miami in terms of just like being tough at the point of attack and being physical with Nikola Jokic and being everything that they have had to do to keep Denver's offense, not shut down, but like keep them at right around maybe that, I'd guess they were at like maybe 109, 111 offensive rating is what it felt like to me. So like a little bit below what their standard is, but not shutting them down by any stretch. Have you seen enough from Miami that makes you believe that they can continue to outscore Denver and get real? You have to get into that 110 to 115 range if you're going to beat Denver, in my opinion. Do you think they can do that and continue to shut down Denver on offense?
Well, I don't think that they shut down Denver. I think that you just find ways to slow them enough that you can outscore them. I've said this
Yep.
for a long time. I think the way to beat Denver is to outscore them a little bit, to throw enough different defenses and coverages so that you make them just think a little bit more. I think this formula that they tapped into in game two of, take the ball out of Murray's hands a little bit more and see if it's just Jokic creating everything that allows you to have a lot of success. And then you just have to be hot from three. And again, Miami has the right personnel, and they've proven it over the last 2 months. They can stay hot from three. They have the formula down. They just need to execute it time and time again. And within that formula, make the right tinkering adjustments to know what to do when, whether that's going zone, finding ways to protect Cody Zeller in some of his minutes a little bit more. Like, I thought Christian Brown was good for Denver in the first
Really
half.
good.
And then Miami found ways to go at him a little bit more and play him off the floor inexperience-wise in that second half. So continuing to just hit the right buttons with what is presented to you is going to be a key in this series for Miami. If there's one guy in the world we know can do it, it's Spo.
Here's the other thing too. I think that Miami is kind of in game two, at least. I shouldn't say this in game one, because game one was Denver's. Like, they just absolutely look, that was a 10-point game, I think, or 11-point game by the end of it. But Denver dictated and controlled that game from the tip, it felt like. In game two, it felt like Miami did a good job of making it more on Miami's terms, in terms of playing physically, and then in terms of forcing Denver into more difficult circumstances on the defensive end at the very least. Michael Malone is a great defensive coach. My guess is that he's going to figure out some answers here moving forward in terms of just figuring out who to help. How do we attack X outs here? How do we attack closeouts onto these shooters? Do we just have to stay home? Do we just trust, frankly, like Nikola Jokic one-on-one against Bam Adebayo, like constantly? I think that's like a real question for them. Like, do you just buy Nikola Jokic defensively to be able to shut down Bam Adebayo as a scorer in a real way? I thought that in game one, they did a really good job. I know that Bam ended up with 26 points and 13 rebounds and 5 assists and everything, but like Bam had to work for those. He ended up, I think, with 25 shots. He had, I'm looking through, he had a turnover. Like, it was hard for Bam in game one. I thought it was really, really hard. I thought Jokic did a great job. In game 2, it felt like they let Bam be a little bit more of a facilitator and kind of helped off a little bit more. I would be interested to see if they just let Jokic go and say, you have to shut this guy down. The only issue there is if you do that, you're probably getting some diminishing returns on Jokic's offense just in terms of like being tired. And that's not a slight on Jokic. In terms of his conditioning, it's just genuinely like if you're expending more effort on defense, you probably have to expend a little bit more on offense, or you might not have as much to expend on offense.
Yeah. And I'm spitballing here, Sam. I don't know if I even agree with this idea, but could you find a way to cross match and have Jokic guard Kevin Love and then put Aaron Gordon on Bam, switch out a lot of ball screens, Jokic scram in from the weak side, similar to what they did against Phoenix, where he's more of a helper. And then if Bam tries to mismatch post someone off of the switch, that's when Jokic rolls to the lane and they switch out weak side.
I don't mind it, but then what do you do on Jimmy consistently?
Yeah.
That probably then involves playing Bruce Brown instead of Michael Porter Jr., right?
Probably. Although I don't think Porter's been that bad. Like his rear view contests are fine. If he uses his length well once he gets beat, but he does get beat too much.
Yeah, I mean, so then you'd be cross matching probably Kentavious Caldwell-Pope onto Butler, and then you'd be moving Michael Porter Jr. up to like, whoever's on the court of Caleb Martin and Max Strus, kind of like that probably works a little bit. That probably works, to be honest. Yeah. But then you're involving Porter in a lot of exchanges with Strus, which is a little bit of concern as well.
Well, and it worked against Phoenix because they had another non-shooter on the floor next to Ayton. And I don't know if Miami necessarily has that. A non-shooter you can put Jokic on. I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting. These are part of the problems that Miami poses for you as a tough, physical, strong team that also can really shoot. Like finding guys like this that are tough, physical, strong, and can shoot and can space the floor around like a genuine creator. It's why those guys are very, very valuable in the NBA draft. Yeah. Look, I think Miami has proven a little bit more to me. I still don't really think they have the guns to win, but I'm at the point now where genuinely, I thought that there was a chance this would be a sweep. I thought it would be very, very, very difficult for Miami to stop them on offense. Because I thought that Denver would just be able to post these guys and let Jokic go to town, essentially, and then be able to spray out to shooters across the court and everything. And I thought they'd get consistent paint penetration by doing that, by getting the ball into Jokic particularly, and then being able to make it work that way. They haven't been great on offense so far. Miami's done like a pretty good job against them on offense.
Miami's good. They're good.
Eric Spoelstra is like, if Eric Spoelstra pulls this off, we need to talk about Eric Spoelstra as like a top 5 coach of all time.
If he's not already, absolutely have to. Yeah, he's ridiculous.
Yeah. And that's no disrespect to these players. Like the players have been phenomenal for the Miami Heat and they deserve an immense amount of credit. But a lot of what they're doing in terms of like bogging down Denver's offense is like scheme related.
Yeah. And everything they try works. Yeah. Like look at the entirety of the postseason, every rotation, every lineup change, every timely switch to zone defense, every play that they dial up to try to get somebody a shot. It always works.
100%. And by the way, Denver only had 18 transition points in that game, according to ESPN. That's like not a great number for them. Yeah, they outscored Miami 18-5 in transition points, but Denver's typically like up in the 20s in terms of points out on the break. Miami's doing a really good job of getting back and making them work for offense. If everyone knows like, the Matt Ishbia moment, right? Like that comes from every time that there is like a loose ball that goes out of bounds where it's Denver's ball, they try and get it as soon as possible and go and sprint in order to try and create these odd man opportunities. And I think that Miami being willing to just like completely give up the offensive glass in a pretty substantial way, get back in transition as much as they can, be athletic and aggressive in terms of on-ball defensive prowess. In addition to some of the things they're doing, pulling Nikola Jokic away from the rim and forcing him to guard in space, it's really smart. It's really, really sharp stuff from Miami, I think. I'm just like blown away by this team. I love Miami so much. And I still think they probably lose in 6. I think Denver's just way too talented.
I love Miami, man.
I do too.
They do everything you ask of them, and they always find a way. They always find a way.
It really is like a genuine talent deficiency here, I think. Like, if these dudes pull this off, they will have beaten Milwaukee with like Giannis Antetokounmpo, multiple time MVP. They will have beaten like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, multiple time like all NBA guys. Jason Tatum will be a top 3 contender for MVP at some point down the road. And they will have beaten Jokic, multiple time MVP. I mean, this is a team that, like, seriously, you go back through history, right? And I've said this before on the show, but I think it's worth noting in regard to the Miami Heat. You go back all the way through history. The best player on title teams, those guys tend to be like top 20 players of all time. Top 30, maybe, let's say. I love Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is like not quite that, in my opinion. Like he's 100% a top 75 player if they win this title, and I think there's a real case for him there anyway. But he's like not quite at that level in terms of like accomplishments, accolades. We're talking like these top 30 players of all time, like top 25 players of all time. Dirk Nowitzki is so good. Like Dirk Nowitzki is unbelievably good. There is a case that Dirk Nowitzki is like the worst best player on a title team in like the last God knows how many years, probably 30 to 40 years.
Yeah, that is some Chauncey Billups respect right there, my friend.
Outside of the Detroit Pistons, who are the outlier in this. The 2004 Detroit Pistons are the outlier, and Miami would be a similar outlier in this regard. They have Jimmy Butler. I think Jimmy Butler is a better player all time than Chauncey Billups, but like that Detroit Pistons team is the only outlier when it comes to like best players of all time tending to be the best players on title teams. And you could say like maybe that's like a little bit of selection bias, right? Like they become the best players of all time because they lead their teams to titles. But even so, that like, again, Dirk is like among the worst of those guys. Dirk is a 14-time All-Star that made 12 All-NBA teams.
Yeah.
And he's like one of the guys that like isn't among the best. Like you go through, so last year Golden State Warriors, Stephen Curry, Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis. Giannis is going to be a top, 20 to 25 player of all time, if not higher. LeBron James with the Lakers, Kawhi Leonard with the Raptors. Kawhi was just kind of befallen by injuries on some level. I don't know. Like, I think that his ceiling was probably in that top 25 range, right?
It makes sense to me.
Like, probably would have been that if not for the injuries. The four Warriors and Cavs runs, those are Steph Curry and LeBron years. San Antonio Spurs, Tim Duncan, Miami Heat, LeBron James and Dwayne Wade. Dallas Mavericks, Dirk Nowitzki. 2009, 2010 Lakers, those Kobe Bryant. Boston Celtics in 2008, that's Kevin Garnett. 2007 San Antonio Spurs, that is Tim Duncan. 2005 and 2003 Spurs, those are both Tim Duncan as well. 2006 Miami Heat, that's Dwayne Wade, the outlier with the Pistons in 2004. 2002, 2001, 2000 Los Angeles Lakers, that is Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant. 1999, that's Tim Duncan. Bulls, 6 in 8 years, that's all Michael Jordan. 1994, 95, that's Rockets, that's Akeem Olajuwon. 89 and 90 is Isaiah Thomas. 87 and 88 is Magic Johnson. 86 is Larry Bird. 85 is Magic Johnson. 84 is Larry Bird. 83, I believe, if I remember correctly, is going to be Dr. J.
Dr. J in Philly,
and then,
yeah.
Yep, 82 is going to be that's Kareem, right? And I didn't even mention Kareem when I say that Magic Johnson's the best player. 82, I believe, is also Magic Johnson winning the Finals MVP when he is playing center because Kareem isn't there, right? So, yeah, I feel like we're back into the 80. We're back at like 1980 at this point, essentially.
Which, as I'm being told, is over 40 years ago. I still struggle to compute that myself,
and
but that's...
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
And outside of that Detroit Pistons team, the three worst players to win titles are probably Isaiah Thomas, Dirk Nowitzki, Kevin Garnett is the best player on the team, right?
Yeah.
Think about how good those dudes are.
Yeah.
Think about how great those players are. It's unbelievable. What Miami is doing is like impossible on some level. They deserve an immense amount of credit, and I think Eric Spoelstra deserves an immense amount of credit. I do think that Denver is the more likely team to win, but we shall see.